Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Cris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer, Cris Carter, as he is every single morning. That is Nick Wright. Hey, guys.
Barely got it in. Your hair looks wonderful today, Jen. I haven't even looked at you yet today.
Yep, every day,
running
guys.
behind.
Every day. Take it in.
What? You look great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for my pen.
Yes.
We are ready to do this.
Yesterday,
Yeah.
I did the show as a complete fan. 3 hours unadulterated fandom. Today, I'm back as a professional broadcaster.
Oh.
No.
Really?
Oh.
Yes.
Your team won last night. Big win for your Warriors, and you're going to take your fan hat off for that?
Well, no, I'm a fan of the Warriors, but also I'm a fan of teams that do things the right way. But just I'm back
the
to
way
being
they're
a
supposed to do it.
broadcaster.
All right.
Yes.
It's good to have you back.
Yes, I got
we
my,
missed you
just
for a
my
day, but
basic
it's
blue
good to have
on.
you.
Let's get it.
Spicy night.
I'm trying to win an Emmy today.
Spicy night in the NBA last night. Let's call them the Capulets and the Montagues of the NBA these days, the Clippers and Rockets. And unlike Shakespeare, zero love between the two. They played each other last night in a game filled with tension, with fouls, with heated exchanges. Clippers won it 113-102. Don't forget, Houston's Chris Paul, remember, left the Clippers last year for Houston. Well, after the game, said Chris Paul reportedly led 3 teammates, including James Harden, through a tunnel to the Clippers locker room. The players had to be removed by security. It was a mess. Here's Doc Rivers after all the chaos.
Yeah, let's put it like this. Our team was in our locker room. That's all I'll say. I'll let you do the rest of the investigation. I will say their entire team was not in their locker room. Now, you're going to have to figure it out from there. But I've led you pretty well on that one.
We were where we were supposed to be. We were in our locker room. So, whatever happens over there, I mean, we can't control what anybody else does. We controlled what we did. We were in our locker room. Everybody was in our seats. That was it. You should ask. You got to ask them.
All right, so there's probably a lot that maybe I don't know, a little bit of the background or context here for all of this. Do you want to set us up a little bit?
Let me just tell America what happened last night, because if you're watching us right now, my guess is you were not watching the late-night NBA West Coast game. During the game, a lot of war of words. There was an exchange between Blake Griffin and Mike D'Antoni. Blake seemed to go out of his way to bump D'Antoni. Later in the game, D'Antoni dropped an F-bomb for all the world to see right on Blake. Blake returned it. Then there is the NBA's crown prince of nepotism, Austin Rivers, in street clothes on the bench. Yap, 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 yap. You also have the added thing. People don't always really like playing with Chris Paul. He's kind of a demanding teammate. So a lot of those former Clippers teammates are glad they're former teammates. So all that leads to ejections near the end of the game. And then Chris Paul, because he was a Clipper, evidently knew about a secret passageway to the back entrance of the Clippers locker room. He, James Harden, Trevor Ariza, and Gerald Green went to the back entrance. They sent the giant Swiss kid, Clint Capella, to the front entrance to knock on the door. While he's knocking on the door, they're trying to get in through the back entrance. Allegedly, the cops were called because they wanted to go talk to Austin Rivers. Maybe Blake Griffin as well, but Austin Rivers talks a little too much given his accomplishment in the NBA, and everyone knows his daddy literally gave him his contract. So that's the background to what we saw. You had Clint Capella as maybe a diversion. These guys going through a back tunnel. And that's what we got, which is another reason why the NBA is the greatest league in the world. I now defer to my friend.
Let me ask you this. Do you really think these guys were going in there, they were just going to start they wanted to really sit down and talk to them? Was this going to be a fight? Was it going to be a skirmish? Like,
I don't think they wanted to sit down and talk.
Okay, so you said they wanted to go in there and talk to Rivers and maybe Blake Griffin. Like, this thing could have really turned into something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because the thing, too, is if a guy gets afraid, you try to intimidate a guy's going to have pride, and around your colleagues, like, you might respond a little bit more boldly than you would if you were by yourself. But to me, the NBA and the players, like, there's something going on with the players now. It seems like there's more trash talking, there's more conflict, not only player to player, but player to ref. And a lot of it can be avoided. You know, Blake Griffin, I can understand the beef with Chris Paul, all that, because it's like they decided, the Clippers, they're going to go with Blake Griffin as their future compared to Chris Paul. Let him go to Houston, gave Blake the extension and everything. So there's some other little subplots in this. Chris Paul maybe not happy with some of his teammates. He mentioned they're not being happy with Chris Paul. Chris Paul not being happy there. But someone can really get hurt. And at the end of the day, you know, like you might laugh and joke, but like someone can get hurt. And I don't believe in confronting a grown man because he's got too much pride to go away. All right? And something serious can happen. In today's world, too, there's no more fist fights. Like, I mean, a guy pulls out some hardware and something like that.
What was supposed to happen in that locker room?
Listen, I don't think that anyone involved really thought there was going to be a brawl, but we saw it literally.
But why are you going over there, though?
Thank you. Why?
I think to punk Austin Rivers, because Austin Rivers, you're real tough sitting in street clothes on the bench with your daddy a few seats next to you. Let's see how tough you are right now. Let's see. And they brought, it is interesting who they brought with them. Gerald Green is about that business, boss, to paraphrase Marshawn Lynch. Gerald Green will throw. Trevor Ariza might throw. I don't know if Harden's got maybe too much of an image. And Chris Paul, showing leadership on and off the court, knows the back alleys of Staples Center. Within 30 seconds of the game ending, he devised a mission. Clint Capella, you're going to be our decoy. We're going to go this way. So there's a lot of elements to this. Chris Paul also, you mentioned some bad blood between he and the Clippers. He did have a funny quote after the game. They should have gone to their go-to man, Lou Williams, more. That's a shot at Blake Griffin. Like, that's an obvious shot at Blake Griffin.
Yes.
But also the Clippers are a team that is known to be, from coach down, a bunch of whiners to the refs and the other team. And Austin Rivers and Blake are two of the... Blake's been, I want to say, considered, not by me, by other NBA players, a pretend tough guy his whole career. He didn't do much to diminish that reputation when the one fight he's gotten in was with the trainer of the team when Blake broke his hand punching him outside of a restaurant. And then there's Austin, who's always talking. And the Rockets weren't having it last night. I'm not justifying it. I'm just trying to give the background as to what happened.
Listen, we know that. Like, players are going to talk. They're going to be petty. There are going to be issues. There's going to be skirmishes. There are going to be fouls. Players are going to get thrown out of a game. I don't remember ever hearing about a story where a group of players actually went to the opposing team's locker room with for whatever reason, 30 seconds after a game ends, with a plan in place, like, you're going to go in the front, we're going to come in through the back. You don't feel like maybe this has gotten too far now? I mean, if they weren't stopped, I don't know what would happen.
There have been plenty of, okay, meet me outside the locker room. Now, as far as a plan, like with Chris Paul, but there have been plenty confrontations with players, more so in the NBA than in the NFL. The stadiums are bigger in the NFL. The locker rooms are further away in the NFL. But typically NFL players, too, I think that we understand something bad can happen. I remember my rookie year in Philadelphia, Jerome Brown, God rest his soul, first-round draft pick from the Miami Dolphins. The offensive line, they thought they were going to rookie initiate him on the field, treat him bad on the field. And we had, in Philadelphia then, we had the practice facility. We could drive our cars from the locker room to the practice facility. So our cars were right outside the field. And in them trying to initiate Jerome Brown, he got so frustrated and they began to fight on the field, he walked off the field and went to his car. And in his car, I was his roommate. He had over 20 guns that he owned. And he was going in the trunk of his car, and I knew at that point, I learned, man, I'm not messing with none of these guys, all right? Because these guys are different, and they will hurt you. That was one of several instances where either I saw someone that was going to brandish a weapon. So I'm not trying to go meet with someone, all right, in their locker room to try to confront them because nothing good comes from it.
And Jenna, you mentioned that you don't remember guys going to locker rooms. NBA guys used to be able to settle this on the court. You used to be able to either deliver a few hard fouls, the iconic picture of Dr. J and Larry Bird, two all-time greats, holding each other by the throat. Like, there used to be real on-court settling of scores. The NBA has gotten rid of that, but it hasn't gotten rid of the testosterone and the machismo.
I think that in that era, too, there was more respect for the players. Now, we did see some violent things happen, but, I mean, trash talking is going to always be part of sport, but the overall respect, to me, through the years, has gone down player to player.
So now look at these two teams. Right now, they would meet in like the first round or so of the playoffs. What does this mean for these two teams going forward? What do we expect?
So I think this was actually the Clippers, to me, are a barely relevant team for the NBA playoff picture this year. In fact, I think while right now they could be a playoff team, my guess is they sell off some parts. DeAndre Jordan could get traded. Lou Williams could get traded. So I'm going to focus on the Rockets side of this. Man, I think this was a really good moment for them. As far as rallying around Chris Paul, the knock on the Rockets has been they have underachieved in the playoffs. Their star, their MVP, James Harden, has wilted in big moments. The one knock on Chris Paul is that he's never advanced past the second round of the playoffs. And
he gets hurt.
Sure, and he gets hurt later, absolutely. And one of the reasons people have believed that Chris Paul-led teams have not had more success is because by the end of a year, you're sick of him. He is such a micromanager. He is such a little floor general that guys tend to tune him out by the end of seasons. I think this moment, this rallying moment, they play a video for Chris Paul beforehand. He gets an ovation, and by the end of the game, he's out there leading a siege on the Clippers locker room. I think it's actually a positive sign for the Rockets and their chances late in the season.
A couple of things. There's an important date, February 28th. That's when these two teams meet again. So it will be very interesting. I'm sure the eyes of the NBA will be on this game. And based on my source, NBA, he told me Chris Paul and Ariza and them were going over to interview he was going over to interview some of the Clippers to see if they want to be in the next insurance commercial.
The next State Farm commercial.
Yeah, to see if they could ride in the car. Yeah, to see if he could ride in the back seat.
Sense.
Right on the hump.
Now we get it.
Yeah,
I don't think we knew it. And if you just told us that 8 minutes ago,
so Capella was telling him to come out to the front. That's where his audition
was. Leave it to CC to get the real story.
Had they known that, they wouldn't have called the LAPD on
my source.
No, I love your source. I want to meet your source and take your source out for lunch. Cavs hosted the Warriors last night. Some would say these are the two teams who will be left standing at the very end. Also, these are the two teams who were left standing at the very end the last 3 years. So there's that. Golden State won this one, 118-108, behind 32 points from Kevin Durant, a quiet 32, as Nick would say. LeBron had 32 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists in the loss. Cleveland has now lost 8 of their last 10. Here is LeBron James after the game.
You want to play well, you want to see where you are, because for the most part they've been playing well for a long time now. So, you want to try to get better and better and see things that you can work on going forward, things that you need to get better at, things you can continue to get better at. So, it was a good game for us, for 36 minutes maybe 40 minutes. We had some opportunities, but we weren't able to cash in.
So, you see, when you look at this game, I don't know if you want to call it a barometer game for where the Cavaliers are right now. We already talked about how they're having kind of a slowdown in January like they normally do. Are the Warriors just miles ahead of the Cavaliers at this point, or is this just a regular season? It could have gone either way.
It's hard to say miles. This was a good game for the Cavs. The Cavs played a very good first half. It was very, very competitive, up and down. I don't think the Cavs can continue to play the style that the Warriors play and beat them at that style. Now, let's not get carried away with the regular season, because I think that with Golden State sweeping Cleveland in the 2-game series, I think also in 2015 they swept them, but that's the one year that Cleveland did win the championship, I think. So I wouldn't get too carried away, but the Cavs have lost 8 out of the last 10. The truth is, if they had played with the same intensity they played with last night, they would be in good shape, because we just getting through a stretch where they had won 18 of 20, 18 of 19.
Yep.
So, but they didn't play like this. So they go on these laws. Last night, you could see that they're still trying to get Isaiah. What type of role was he going to play? Tristan Thompson's coming back, getting healthy. So his role in the lineup. And Kevin Love, it's totally changed his role, and he was playing his best basketball. So they still have some time. No, they're not light years apart, but Golden State is the best team in the NBA. They are my pick to be able to repeat as NBA champions. So they're significantly better than the Cavs right now.
They've been, listen, for the Cavs to beat the Warriors, and the Warriors have now won, if my math is correct, 7 of the last 8 against Cleveland. For the Cavs to beat the Warriors one thing has to happen, and then a few other things do. But the first thing that has to happen is LeBron has to be transcendent. LeBron's got to do what he did in the final 3 games of the 2016 finals. He's got to be a guy that gives you like 36, 12, and 10 in order for them to win. Last night, LeBron was good. He had 32, 8, and 6, the 4 blocks we talked about. But he also had 8 turnovers, and he was careless with the ball at times. And it was a good basketball game, but it was not a, oh my God, this is a performance for the ages. The Cavs have never beaten the Warriors in a game that mattered without LeBron having an, oh my God, this is a performance for the ages performance. So the question is, can he do that 4 times in 7 games come June? So I just think that needs to be a given. But I also think people need to start to acknowledge this Cleveland team, whether you like it or not, clearly toggles the on-off switch. Cece, if the Cavs played the way they had played the last 2 weeks, they'd have got beat by 35 points, right? Yep. And I know they ended up losing by 10. They had a terrible cold streak to start the 4th quarter when LeBron was on the bench. This game was tied 93-93 early in the 4th, and then the Cavs, I believe, went 2 of 15 from the field, and that's what allowed the game to get blown open, and the Warriors ended up walking to a victory. Like, the Cavs clearly were in almost a self-induced lull. I think they showed last night they can snap out of it. Now, the concern is if you watched Isaiah Thomas, man, Isaiah, you hope right now when you're watching him that he's just out of shape and that he's just not fully healthy. Because if the new normal for Isaiah Thomas is that he lost a step due to the hip injury, that he will not get back, then all of a sudden, if he's not an explosive player at his height, it's a real problem. They traded the second best player on their team for a pick, Jay Crowder and Isaiah Thomas. Crowder's been bad. Isaiah Thomas last night, I believe, was 5 of 21 from the field, 8 of 21 from the field, and he has struggled mightily. The last 3 games, he's 13 of 47. That's a concern point if he doesn't get better. But you saw last night that Cleveland can ratchet it up when they want to.
But Isaiah, still, even when they ratchet up, it's, I don't know, back to your question, like, are they miles apart? Depending on a LeBron, what did you call it?
Transcendent performance.
Transcendent, because we've seen LeBron do everything. So that's your hope. This guy's got to be transcendent 4 games. Like, so Jenna, I'll go back. Yes, they are miles apart. If that's what we're waiting on 4 of those performances and the other guys can just do anything, yes, they are. Because it's hard to put that type of pressure on the king. And as you can see the Warriors last night, from my point of view, they have gained an extreme amount of confidence in playing against the Cavaliers.
Listen, the Warriors are the most, just as far as like league rankings, they're the most talented team ever put together. Like, period, point blank. They have the 2nd best player in the world and the 3rd or 4th best player in the world and the 10th or 11th best player in the world and the best defensive player in the world. They have all that, and those are 4 separate individuals. We've never seen a team like that. So, of course, LeBron's got to be out of this world for the Cavs to have a chance to compete. That was the case.
That's why I think the story are other people, because it's hard to rely on that. It's more about Kevin Love. It's more about, do they trade Tristan Thompson? It's D-Wade. Does he have the legs to be able to run the point? I believe that IT will get better. He had a hip injury. It's a lower extremity. He's a strong little player. Your legs and trying to get back into game shape are the last thing. And he's a jump shooter. He's a jump shooter and a dribble drive guy. So his legs will come back to him in playing all those minutes. But you have to keep playing him. He'll start. He's not going to shoot 30% for the rest of the season.
What does that look like, a month?
I don't know that. I don't know that, but I know after the All-Star break, he'll be significantly better than he is right now.
And he did say after the game last night, he's like, I know I don't have my legs yet. Just wait till I have my legs back.
And the Cavs are, I think, sacrificing some opportunities to win games in trying to get him into it. I mean, he led the team in shots last night, despite being clearly not near 100%.
And he played, I think, 32 minutes or something.
Yeah, he played the most he's played since the injury.
Yeah, don't forget he's playing for a contract. So you don't have to think that they called all those shots. He was getting his shots up because he's playing for a contract.
No doubt. Can I just quickly go back to something you said?
Yes.
Because you mentioned Kevin Love. And that is the other factor that we have to watch. Kevin Love has been the only part of his game that's been improved since Isaiah got there on the court is his three-point percentage, and that's just because there's going to be more spacing. But he's averaging fewer points, he's averaging fewer rebounds. He was playing the best basketball we'd seen him play in 5 years, and now he's playing. It's a very small sample size, but some of the bad Kevin Love we've seen in Cleveland, that is something that has to be monitored. Can Kevin Love and Isaiah Thomas figure out the 2-3 on that team if they're going to have a chance to compete against the Warriors?
All right, to the NFL now. We are down to 4 teams, and the Steelers are not one of them. Pittsburgh still reeling from their loss to the Jags on Sunday. Their quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, played a great game and afterwards said he still feels like he's got a lot left in the proverbial tank. Big Ben, who turns 36 in March, says he wants to play at least 3 more seasons. I love when they get specific. However, offensive coordinator Todd Haley might be there no more seasons. CC, do the Steelers need to make big changes next year, or do you like what they've got in place right now?
They say the definition of insanity is continuing doing the same thing over again, expecting to get different results. So if they want to change where they are, I think that even when you win, you make changes. So I know that when you lose, you must make changes. The Steelers, when they started on this quest, based on what they've told them, based on in November, when Mike Tomlin telling Tony Dungy, their goal was to win the Super Bowl. Well, they are a couple games short of that. So looking at the organization, should they make changes? Yes, they should make changes. And I believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, or their lack of defense that they've had the last several years. People will point to Todd Haley. I don't believe Todd to be a problem. People will point to some of the other things with their personalities. I believe those things could be tinkered, but their inability to get to the quarterback, the inability to turn the football over and play Pittsburgh Steelers type football, you are not supposed to give up 40 points to the Jacksonville Jaguars in Pittsburgh in January in a playoff. With that home field advantage, you're not supposed to. So for me, if I was going to change some things, I would stop looking ahead to the schedule. Like that would be a normal company policy. You know, we're on to what we're doing that week. And then I would tinker with that defense because I believe they have too good of athletes to play on that defense. And they have to make some significant changes anyway because Ryan Shazier, we don't know what his future is. And you cannot plan around an NFL player who is currently in a wheelchair. You cannot make long-term plans around that type of player.
All right, so it is amazing to me that after a playoff game where they score 42 points against the best defense in football, that the offensive coordinator is the one on the hot seat. I understand that Todd's in the last year of his contract, and full disclosure for the audience, I know Todd personally, I like him. So, like, take that for what you will, but I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can in all this commentary. Big Ben and Todd have never been on the same page. If you read Ben's quotes his first year there, people wondered if Todd Haley was going to last the first year. They then had success late in the year. The offense really turned things on. They also had the addition of Le'Veon Bell, Martavis Bryant. They had all these weapons, and it has been a sustainable marriage, if not a happy marriage. Plus,
you had the issue in Week 5 where he sort of blamed Todd Haley for perhaps what he might have or might not have done on the field. The point is it came up.
He's blamed Todd Haley at every chance he's gotten. When they asked him about the quarterback sneak, he's like, we don't do that anymore. It's above my pay grade. If you remember the end of the Patriot game, and I want to bring up the end of the Patriot game for just a moment, because that is the moment that turned this Steelers season. I wouldn't make massive changes. This team was 13-3, the best record they've had under Mike Tomlin. They were poised until the Ryan Shazier injury to me, and that's something that we probably should have accounted for more defensively for them to be the best team in the NFL. But I want to talk about that Patriot game for a moment because we all talk about the Jesse James play as if that were the last play of the game. The last play of the game that mattered was Ben Roethlisberger throwing a ludicrous interception in a game they were losing by 3 points. That's not on the head coach. That's not on the offensive coordinator. That's a game that should have, at the very least, gone to overtime, and the Steelers had a chance to get the 1 seed, but Roethlisberger makes a terrible decision. They're not going to change quarterbacks. They're not going to change head coaches. I wouldn't change the offensive coordinator. The Steelers, we left that game, CC, thinking this might be the best team in the NFL. Now, they lost their Defensive Player of the Year in Ryan Shazier, and they seemed unprepared for the first quarter of that Jags game. But I don't think it'd be insane for them to say, let's run this thing back.
Yes, but the thing about it, Nick, and my frustration is how they're going about trying to win a championship. They're not going about it the right way. And the overall team chemistry and what comes out of the locker room, how many voices they're going to have, and, you know, these guys are individual contractors. AB got paid. Let's look at last year at this time. We were upset at Antonio Brown because the Facebook video, everything like that. He was in the last year of his contract. Well, you know what they did? They made him the highest paid wide receiver in the game. So they empowered him. L. Bell, they put the franchise tag on him. So he said he's going to sit out. So now even before the Jacksonville game. So you're talking about all these things about New England. They have zero to do with focusing on the task at hand. They had a monumental game with Jacksonville, and they couldn't be focused enough as a unit to be able to get through that game. They lost twice at home to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, if you lose, and if you go through that and you don't think you need changes, then you're not going to win in the National Football League. Not only are they not up to New England, but there are other teams in the AFC that are catching up to them. Teams like Jacksonville. So I think they do need to make changes, and they don't have to be physical changes, but from a philosophy standpoint. If they can't stay focused on task, if they can't have one voice coming out of the locker room, I've told you this all along, Nick, it's very, very important, and until they get that, they will not win a Super Bowl. There's a lot of talented teams in the league.
But, Cece, what changes can you make if those are the personalities that you have?
You can change your philosophy as a head coach.
Yes. I'm
What's
sure
wrong
there's
with
a million personalities in other locker rooms, and you don't hear that. You don't think they're personalities? Rob Gronkowski is a personality.
Right, and
he's been silenced by Bill Belichick.
No, he hasn't.
Occasionally, he makes a mistake, but when he's on that podium, he says, I know I'm not supposed to say anything. You've never heard him say anything about
to the Patriot way, but Gronk is still a shell of himself if he was somewhere else.
Okay, but so my question is this, though. Mike Tomlin's not going to change his philosophy. Mike Tomlin's philosophy has been very...
You're going to get the same thing.
But the same thing is, other than the Patriots, the most successful team in the league over the last decade. I mean, they have the second best winning percentage. They've been to 2 Super Bowls. They've won 1. Aside from New England.
You have this sheet right here? Mm-hmm. What does that sheet say, Nick?
It's this ranking.
Who is that? Ranking what?
The offense, defense, all the categories.
Okay, and what about this side?
It's the NFC.
Okay, and what's on this side?
The AFC.
And on this side?
The NFC.
These are all the teams that are playing? Mm-hmm. And Pittsburgh's not playing?
I understand.
Oh, okay.
I understand.
Oh, okay. Because the great teams are playing now. So just to think, I'm just a breath away from New England. No, you're not. You're not even. We in the Final Four, and the only reason why we're talking about you is because of the controversy. That's the only reason. We're not breaking down no X's and O's. Pittsburgh, it's a wrap.
Okay.
And because Pep is telling me it's a wrap, but their season is a wrap.
Welcome back to First Things First. We welcome in Coach Eric Mangini on a Tuesday morning.
Good to see you,
What's up, Coach?
Good morning. Good morning.
You have been hilarious the last few appearances.
You've had
hilarious for a long time. This hasn't been appreciated. Yeah, that's my,
It's our fault for not setting you up properly. You're right.
Yeah.
Our apologies.
Touché, sir.
Yeah,
the Mangini way.
Yeah, really. All right, Coach, there's very little difference between what the Jaguars are going through now, getting ready to face the Patriots in the AFC title game, and what we went through on our high school volleyball team facing Fox Lane in the regional opening round. Why not us? Why can't we be the ones to win, Coach? Why is everyone laughing? Anyway, why can't we be the team of destiny? The Jaguars' defense is as good as any the Pats have seen all year. Second in the league in points allowed, sacks, interceptions. My question to you, Coach, how worried should New England be about Jacksonville getting ready for the weekend?
Well, when I look back at that Fox Lane girls volleyball team, and I think of some of the lessons that we all learned from that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We didn't learn those lessons.
Yeah, you can project them forward to where we are today. I think New England should be worried based off of a couple of things. The fact they can generate pass rush with 4 defensive linemen, and that's the key thing. You're not going to successfully blitz Tom Brady, and typically when you do try to bring pressure, he's going to end up hurting you. So that to me is a concern. The second thing would be their ability to run the ball and run the ball effectively and keep Tom on the bench. Those two things give them a very good chance to be successful. Now, the difference between New England and Pittsburgh is there were plays in that game last week where Pittsburgh created opportunities for Jacksonville, either by not being in the right gap or not being sound in coverage. You saw it really early in the game with the tight end running free in the flat. There's nobody there. That's not going to happen. New England's not going to beat themselves. So Jacksonville's going to have to execute consistently and at a high level. And I think New England at the end of the day is going to make it be all about Blake Bortles and see whether or not he can actually beat him. And I don't think at the end of the day he's going to be able to do that.
You have to be, any team that makes the Final Four obviously has some things they're great at. So there's not going to be any walkovers. I understand that. Like, you can't go into any pro football game, much less a conference championship game, like, oh, there's no way we lose. But we also should level set and maybe take a 10,000 feet view of where the Pats are, where they started the season, where they are right now. They came into this season as the heaviest favorites to win a Super Bowl that we've seen from any team in a decade. Throughout the season, once they dealt with the Julian Edelman injury in the preseason, throughout the season, they have been very fortunate as far as key players being injured, more fortunate than we've seen from New England in recent years. They also have been fortunate as far as injuries other teams have suffered. We mentioned Ryan Shazier, but Carson Wentz, the guy who was probably going to win MVP on the other side of the bracket. Aaron Rodgers. Now they see Drew Brees getting knocked out of the playoffs. And their path to winning their 6th Super Bowl goes through Marcus Mariota, Blake Bortles, and then either Case Keenum or Nick Foles. So I say all that to say this. Could the Jaguars win this game? Sure. But everything has set up perfectly for New England. Part of that is their own doing by getting the 1 seed. That's why they get to play Marcus Mariota. They earned that. Part of that's to do with their maintenance. Maybe it's the pliability as far as why their guys have been healthy. I don't know. But the Pats are in a better position right now to be heavy Super Bowl favorites than any year I can remember since the undefeated team because of what's happened around them in the league. And I know this past weekend was about defenses, but because of the other quarterbacks left standing. You're grimacing, though.
You disagree.
When you look at this season, so they come in as these ridiculous favorites. They're going to go undefeated. Everybody's talking about that. Then they lose a couple of games early. Oh, my God, the defense is the worst thing ever. Tom Brady, he may be done. Then you have the Jimmy Garoppolo trade and all that went with that. And then you have the ESPN article. And through all that, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed in New England. The reason they're the favorites is because of the consistency of approach that they have and all this other stuff. Well, you know, I understand what you're saying about it being aligned and Big Ben got eliminated.
Absolutely.
You know, and this can happen at any point to anybody. The difference between New England and all those other teams is the way that they consistently approach things.
Really, this is about Jacksonville. It's about how does Jacksonville match up? Who are the bodies? Let us inform America who New England's facing. It's not about New England. America knows about New England. We know about the New England way. We know about Tom Brady. We know about Belichick. We know about their record. But who's going to be the team on the other side? And I'm going to tell you, I would be concerned. And I know that New England, they're concerned about the teams that they can't play because they know in football that you have to play out the games. So they appropriate a concern when there shouldn't be concern. So the size of Jacksonville, not only their defensive line, but their cornerbacks, their ability to play man and zone, their overall team philosophy. Bill Belichick talked about that because these two teams faced each other in the preseason, but Jacksonville spent an extended amount of time in New England practicing with them before the game. I think it was 6 days. So they were able to reach out and touch Jacksonville and say, man, this is a powerful. Nate Solder said, wow, they're very, very aggressive. They go about things a little bit different in practice. You can see that they're very, very talented. Even in saying that, Matthew Slater said, wow, this is a promising team. You can see the way that they go about practice. So they've been impressed with Jacksonville because they saw them up close and personal. How do I know this? Because my experience in the league, seeing teams. Coach, you remember Frank Minifield, Hanford Dixon. We practiced against them my young days in Philadelphia, and I was able to see what real man-to-man and what grown men playing football was really about. They initiated me. We practiced against Tony Dungy. and Herm Edwards in Kansas City. So the exchange of information and the amount of respect after spending 4 or 5 days with these guys, it went up because I was able to reach out and touch them. And I believe New England, they will have the healthy amount of respect because they weren't thinking about any other team, Jenna. They were thinking about winning their game, and whoever shows up, we're going to prepare for that football team. And they realized Calais Campbell, they paid him $60 million. They had problems with Calais when he was in Arizona. Malik Jackson from Denver, they had problems with him when he was on that Denver defense. So you can believe that New England knows what they're going to face, and it's not all that other stuff on the periphery. They're facing a big, powerful football team that can run the ball with Fournette and all these high draft picks and great free agents. So I believe that New England is very, very concerned about what's at hand.
And the fact that they practiced in the preseason, they had all those practices together, to me, that's an advantage for New England because I promise you, those practices were written up. Those players were written up. The scouts watched practices. Yes. They didn't look at that as, oh, hey, we're going to work against this other team. That was part of it, but they also evaluated top down that Jacksonville team and that practice tape. You not only have game tape on whoever you're facing, but you can watch one-on-one practice reps and go back and see strengths and weaknesses of guys. And I'm sure that New England has those write-ups and is going to be able to use that. And look, Bill say it doesn't matter, it's a different team, all that stuff. That tape is valuable at this point.
Right. The only thing that's different, Calais Campbell and Jalen Ramsey didn't participate in those practices. So two of the bigger, more imposing figures, they didn't see them. But also, it speaks to Bill Belichick and the respect he has for Jacksonville's organization, Tom Coughlin and Doug Marrone, because he wouldn't schedule you for 6 days at your facility if he didn't respect the way you practiced, the way you taught, the way you handled your players. So that's significant, too, the amount of respect Bill has for the organization.
Patriots and Jaguars. One team has not said a word about the other. The other team has said they're going to beat the other team and win the Super Bowl. Dare I ask you to pick who said what? No, that's hilarious. Pats are buttoned up. They're silent night. Jags cornerback Jalen Ramsey predicted a Super Bowl win. Is Ramsey helping or hurting the Jags with the verbal bravado? Here's Jags head coach Doug Marrone.
You know, you come back and you got all the fans here and things of that nature. And, you know, obviously that's something that everybody, you know, they want to do when you get this close. You know, whether you have to say it or not, you know, the one thing I do know, you know, the road to it always leads, you know, through New England. So, you know, our focus, you know, isn't on anything else but the New England Patriots.
All right, Nick, what do you think? Is Ramsey's trash talking helping or hurting this Jaguars team?
For almost any team, I would say don't do this before you play the Patriots. For this team and this player, I think they have to.
Why?
Because I think they are – the Jags had such an organizational stink about them as the punchlines of the NFL for almost – you know, for the better part of 20 years now. Basically since Mark Brunell and Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardell and Fred Taylor were there in the early days of the franchise. They just went quarterback after quarterback, coach after coach, bad defense after bad defense. And the real change, it's not just Jalen. Now, listen, there are a lot of great players on the team, but Jalen is the sassiest, and Jalen is the brashest, and Jalen is the one that likes to talk the most.
He
has become right, and he is probably the most physically, him or Calais Campbell, the most physically talented players on the team. And so I think he has to carry himself like that. There are no two teams over the last 15 years have a bigger dichotomy of success than the Jags and the Patriots. No two quarterbacks that have a bigger dichotomy of how they're discussed than Brady and Bortles. So Jalen Ramsey saying, we're going to beat the brakes off you, and then we're going to go to the Super Bowl and win that. Like, maybe it adds a little bit to the Pats' motivation, but I think the Jags have to quote the man who won't be named on this show, speak it into existence to a degree. So I understand what Jalen's trying to do.
Yeah, please don't go there no more. Jalen Ramsey is the modern day, for those recent history, let's go with Richard Sherman. And let's look at Seattle, where they were before they got Richard Sherman. Skill set, very, very similar. Jalen's a better athlete, but Richard Sherman kind of set a standard for corners, not only on the field, but off the field. Remember when they faced New England? Yo, bro, you mad?
You mad,
okay.
right. Face to face with Brady.
So I take that picture of Jalen, and also Jalen was a number 3 pick from Florida State. He is an extremely talented cornerback, one of the most talented that we've had drafted in the NFL the last 15 years. Arguably, him and Xavier Rhodes of Minnesota, those are the best. They've had the best 2 seasons this year. So who is this? This guy is phenomenal talent, comes from Florida State. Oh, Florida State. I had to take you back to Deion Sanders. Before Atlanta Falcons drafted him, they had won 5 games and 3 games. They were no different than Jacksonville. He changed that city. He changed that culture. Happened to be a Florida State guy. Is mentored by Deion Sanders. So, no, this is who Jalen is. If you follow him on Twitter, if you listen to his interviews, we as a national media, we like to say we cover all the teams, but we don't. All right? We haven't had our eye on Jacksonville, but we had Jalen on the show. We knew that they were an up-and-coming team, and he's one of the bright players in the National Football League. So that's his personality. He's not out of character. But when you get to a certain point, you have to learn, like, what's the best thing. And right now, it's okay for Jalen to be that way.
Cece, what'd you say before I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago in the playoffs? If you're a guy that comes out early and warms up in a regular season game, come out early and warm up before the playoff game. If you get on the late bus, get on the late bus. Don't change your routine. Jalen's a guy that talks, that likes to talk trash, that likes to go at you. And I'm going to add one other small piece to it, Jenna. The Jags defense wasn't good last week. And so the fact that Jalen is immediately saying, it doesn't matter, we got this, we're going to the only way for the Jags to beat the Pats is for the defense to be playing with such supreme confidence. So, again, I think it does more good than harm.
I will just tell you, I like it. I think it's exciting. It's fun. It gives the team who's are clear underdogs just a chance at something. Like, it just fires you up a little bit. All that being said, how is it any different than what we sit here and rip the Steelers for doing when they talk about the Patriots and the Patriots don't play for another 3 weeks? Like, why is this trash talking any different than other trash
Because
talk?
they're in their sights. I see the deer.
He's talking about the Super Bowl.
Well, he's saying we're going to beat the Patriots
and win the Super Bowl.
Right, but he was telling the fans, okay, come back next week, come back in a couple weeks. So based on what he said, he had to tell the fans we're going to win the Super Bowl because he was telling them to come back. Come back after we beat New England, and then come back after we're going to win the Super Bowl. But Jalen's interviews, he said things like this to reporters throughout the season. Not necessarily the Super Bowl, but it was in this same vein. So I'm not surprised by it. It's totally different than Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh had Jacksonville, who had beaten them very badly, who they had to play, and Pittsburgh was thinking about other things. So it's totally different.
And Pittsburgh had a half dozen Jalen Ramseys. Like, that's the other thing. Pittsburgh had a bunch of guys.
And they had other conflict in the locker room. They had a quarterback. They had a lot more stuff.
Welcome back to First Things First. We welcome in Ray Lewis. Ray, by our count, we are 18 days away from the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Countdown.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I get to join a great man.
You see that? He changed it. He know now.
Yeah.
He didn't talk to him. NFL didn't called him. Hall of Fame got
What's
that number.
over there?
Hey, where you gonna be the night before? Chances are.
If I may, can I tell you a quick story? Because I know you're a
please.
busy guy, so you probably can't watch this show each and every day. We were talking about how the Hall of Fame process works. And Cris talked about how each player has their own presenter and that it's the beat writer for this newspaper in town. Cris, how are they going to present Ray Lewis?
Ray Lewis, linebacker, Baltimore Ravens. Sit on down. Let's debate some of these other guys.
Next.
He said that's what they did with Dan Marino.
Yes.
And that's what they're going to do.
A testament to you and your
Save some
resume,
time for the
Ray.
other argument. Sit down.
You are great.
All right, let's move on.
Looking forward to it, bro.
Ray is blushing. 2 teams coming off emotional wins last week set to face off for all the NFC marbles, Vikings and Eagles. Despite this game being in Philadelphia, the Vikings are the favorites here. Nothing new for Philly. This team getting used to being underdogs this postseason. They're actually encouraging fans to bring dog masks to the game. underdogs.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
All right.
Actually
100%
sold over
true.
500 masks on Amazon.
Yeah, they sold out on Amazon. They were $19. Now they're selling for $40.
Wow.
Just FYI, markup. Ray, you buying the Vikings as road favorites in this one?
Man, I tell you what, when you look at both of these teams, front seven-wise, I know we always look at the shiny pieces, right? The quarterback positions, the wide receiver positions. But when you think about the front sevens on both sides of the football, I am really excited to see how Minnesota's front seven deal with the run game of LeGarrette Blount and IG.
Yeah.
And then vice versa on the other side. Because when you see how they're built, one of the things that – now, I will say this. Secondary-wise, I give a little bit of a nod to Minnesota because Rhodes is probably one of the most dominant corners in the game, just big, physical, and plays the game at a certain level. Nick Foles, Keenum, who pulls that one out? I've always liked the Vikings for a long time coming into this season because of the way they play. You talk about Hendricks and the way they play at the linebacker position. These young boys are running to the football, and everything up front is just getting ate up. So they are flying to the football. So when you say, can Nick Foles make enough plays to beat this defense? Can Case Keenum make enough plays against Philly defense? I think he can.
Can you even believe we're talking about Case Keenum and Nick Foles in the championship game?
I do. Let me tell you why. We focus a lot of times going into playoffs game, going into the seasons, the biggest thing we always talk about, the quarterback position, But nobody talks about the number 1 and number 2 defenses that's still playing right now in the championship games, right? And so when you think about the number 2 defense, the number 3 defense, the Jaguars, number 1 defense, you're talking about defensive teams that's late in the season. Go ahead.
This weekend, I thought of you because I was like, man, I don't know if there's ever been a divisional weekend that Ray Lewis probably enjoyed watching
Every
more.
bit of it.
Because you had 3 matchups where there was clearly one team had the better quarterback and the other team had the better defense.
100%.
And all 3 of those matchups, the better defense won. I'm not including the Pats-Titans because the Pats probably had the better quarterback and the better defense.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the defensive, the first, second-ranked defenses. Of the top 5 scoring defenses in football, here's who's left. 1, 2, 3, and 5.
100%.
Of all 4 of the teams left are in the top 5 scoring defenses in football this week. And even though the Jags-Steelers game didn't go as such, the better defense won every single game, which is something you're right. We always talk about quarterback, and if we're not talking about quarterback, we tend to talk about coach or we talk about a wide receiver. Yeah. But this weekend, it was about punch-you-in-the-mouth defenses. And in the Vikings, they overcame a no-doubt Hall of Famer in Drew Brees.
No doubt. Listen. You get to the end of that game, right? And I say to myself, this is not going to end well. And I'm sitting in my sister's house, and I'm saying, this is not going to end well. One of the things, Chris, that I oh, my gosh, I watch TV. There is so much individual play, right? So everybody puts that one play on Williams, right, at the end of the game. If that's any defense that I've ever played on, there's a full conversation going on before the snap of that ball. There's 10 seconds on the clock. Get your behind back to the 20-yard line. There's nothing else we can do. When that ball drops in the end zone, 3 people wherever the ball at. Tackle the ball, game over, we win the football game. None of that happens. For one man to be left back there to make that play, which was, I don't even know what he was thinking. But for that play to be made like that, you start to see what defenses look like, right? And so I gave this analogy yesterday. Great defenses play on one string. It's a string. It's just like tying your shoe, right? When you need to tighten it up, everybody got to tighten up together. And when you go on that string, that's what makes Minnesota so dominant. That's what makes Philly so dominant. And what makes Jacksonville so dominant. Jacksonville gave up 8 plays in that game. And on the 8 plays they gave up, the string was broken. Somebody wanted to be an individual on that play. I can show you runs where everything fit perfectly, but one guy decided to do something differently. I can show you on pass plays where somebody showed it and said, oh, this is the coverage. That's an absolute lie. It was a breakdown in coverage by one guy who said, I'm just going to be me. And so you ask yourself, even when you transition to the New England Patriots and Jacksonville Jaguars, Jacksonville's defense fits better against New England than they did against Pittsburgh. Because Pittsburgh just got enough weapons everywhere across the board. But I'm telling you, man, it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one.
Now, Ray, question for you. How do you respond after the digs, after the Minneapolis Miracle, and you would be the perfect person because after the Mountain High, miracle after Flacco dropped that bomb on
Jones.
Yes, and Raheem Moore, you know, yet to be seen. You talked about yesterday, does the guy recover? Right. Raheem Moore, he didn't recover from the now, as a team.
Yeah.
Emotionally. Now, they were at home. You guys were on the road, had to get on a flight. How do you capture the good parts of that and be able to move on to the next week? Because you still got a couple more games to win to be Super Bowl champs.
You got a couple more games to win, but what you start to see is sometimes even being good, you need a little luck too. Right? And I can go back to both Super Bowls. I can go back to we played in Oakland, and one of the biggest plays of the game, we only needed one play. Shannon Sharp, 97 yards.
Oh, yes, sir.
Was one play. Backed up.
Yep, hit him down the middle.
All odds are against you. We're playing with Trent Dilfer. We don't have a chance to win in Oakland, and we get one play. We go to Denver, 2012. Everything that counted us out. Already, last game of your retirement. Jacoby Jones. It's just that one magical run. And when you start to see those magical moments happen, you have to ask yourself, is this our year? And if you're Minnesota, you're good enough to go win a game. But when you get things like that to happen, then you almost confirm this is our year.
Cris was in the locker room after the game, and one of the things he pointed out that he was so impressed by is Mike Zimmer let him have like a minute to bask in it, celebrate, and then started going through the schedule for the next day. Practice squad guys, here's when you're showing up.
8:30. The guys who didn't play in the game, 9 o'clock lift. Guys who are injured, I want you in the building as soon as possible.
So the reason I bring it up is people are, like the one-to-one comparison they're showing is the Jacoby Jones, Raheem Moore play.
Yeah.
Do you remember what was John Harbaugh like in the locker room after? Was it similar? What was the mentality, or maybe different because you guys were such a veteran team? If you could take us there.
Yeah, it was kind of different because I was walking up and down the sideline, and before we came out of halftime, one of the things I said, I called John and I said, John, I need the team to come together, and he was like, okay, let's come together. And the same ring that's around my neck, we started reciting Isaiah 54:17, no weapon formed shall prosper, right? And as we're reciting that, we come out, and the guy goes 99 yards on the first kickoff return.
Holiday,
yeah,
I think.
And I'm sitting there saying, look, no weapon. You got to stick to the formula. But what started to happen was, man, we really started to believe. We really started to believe going forward, and what would it look like? And we just kept saying, just give us one play. Give us one play. Just keep us in the game. And I think when you see moments that we saw this weekend, it starts to carry with you, man. And I'm telling you, this weekend is going to be exciting for a couple of reasons. The favorites, whoever you think it is, it won't be. I'm just telling you. And that's what I've been saying this entire playoffs.
Based on the matchup.
But based off the matchup. Because it's not your typical style of football, right? I'm more excited, no jive, to see Tom Brady deal with Jacksonville's defense. Why? There's not a bunch of weapons down the field, and the way that they play defense, now he will exploit certain weaknesses.
That we're going to do that in
hold on. That's exactly what we're talking about.
I was about to go there.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
I know, I see that. Fired up. I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.